How do you get stuffing to stay put in your dishes?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to show you how to do just that by using sodium caseinate and Moo Gloo RM in a beef Wellington. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Guerin.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. Now, here on WTF, every week we talk about unique ingredients and techniques and show you how to do these recipes in your kitchen. So remember, subscribe and ring the bell and you'll get notified of our episodes when they come out. And this week, we are going to show you how to keep your stuffing from falling out and falling apart. Now, Scott, what exactly is happening when someone makes a stuffing and it ends up crumbling? What's going on there?
So sometimes when you make a stuffing, it depends on the dish that you're making. You don't want to have to add a bunch of breadcrumbs, or you don't want to have to add any extra protein like chicken farce, which is basically just chicken puree, to make it stick, because it'll change the flavor.
Okay.
When we change the flavor, we're not getting the best of what we're making. So actually today we're going to be making beef Wellington, and we're going to make sure that that mushroom Duxelles that's in a beef Wellington stays put.
Yeah, and so it sounds like what we want is better presentation without, of course, altering the nature of the recipe itself.
Absolutely.
So what ingredients do you find that really helped in this process?
So the thought process was to add something to this that doesn't change the texture or the flavor. And the thing that we wanted to add was sodium caseinate and transglutaminase RM, or Moo Gloo RM. So basically what that is sodium caseinate is the protein from milk. So if I mix that with my mushroom Duxelles, it's not going to change the flavor, since there's already a little bit of butter mixed into this, so you're not really going to get any different flavors from it. But when I add in the Moo Gloo RM, it's going to take two proteins from the sodium caseinate, glutamine and lysine, and bond them together. So they create kind of a network that holds it in place. It'll almost set on the outside of this this beef tenderloin here. So two issues you can run into here is, if you add too much, you're going to end up with a very bouncy kind of not rubbery texture, just not the texture of mushrooms. A
little too chewy?
Yes. So we went with a little bit lower of a ratio of sodium caseinate, and we were able to find a really great texture that is pretty much just like the mushrooms are traditionally, but it holds on so much better when you slice it, serve it, all those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know that you're prepping what we're going to make today. What is the process for incorporating the Moo Gloo and the sodium caseinate into the mixture? Because it looks like you already have it.
So I have the mixture here, but I haven't added in the sodium caseinate or the Moo Gloo RM yet. So you can make your whole recipe. One thing you don't want to do is add it in while the stuffing is hot, because the transglutaminase will activate early. So it's a great question. So I have the sodium caseinate here, and it looks like a lot, but it's not. It's about 7.5% of the total weight of this. And then I just added in the Moo Gloo RM.
Which is even less, it looks like.
Yeah, so it's about between 0.5 and 1%. So I'm just going to mix that in so it disperses evenly with the sodium caseinate. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour this into the center of my Duxelles. So this is mushroom Duxelles. It's mushrooms, a little bit of pancetta, thyme, garlic, a little bit of butter. And I'm just going to fold this in. Try not to make a mess. And it's going to look a little thick, but that's fine, because once this heats up, it's going to loosen up just a little bit, so that's going to be great.
And I know that in a lot of our episodes we tell people it's important to use a blender, but in this case it doesn't appear to be necessary.
It does not matter with this. You're already dry mixing it with another ingredient, so it works perfectly fine. So I'm going to mix this in here. Then once this heats up, there is a little bit of fat in here, so it's definitely going to kind of liquefy the butter and the bacon fat or the pancetta fat, so it'll be great.
Yeah, if you're intrigued and you're like, what is transglutaminase and what is sodium caseinate? At the end of this episode, we're going to link to the episodes that we've done previously on sodium caseinate and TG, and you can definitely learn about both of those topics in greater depth.
Yeah, so right here I have some of the Moo Gloo RM, and I've just made a slurry, so it's a 3-part water, 1 part Moo Gloo RM, and I'm just going to brush it on this pancetta. Or, I'm sorry, prosciutto. There's pancetta in that, prosciutto here. Just going to brush it on there, and that's going to make sure that these stay together. I did brush in between where they're overlapped as well, but I want to do this because when I put the Duxelles on here, I want this to stick to the Duxelles as well.
Okay.
Right, so I want it to be uniform all the way through, so when you get a nice slice, you get all those bits without, like, say if you slice it, you can pull some of the prosciutto through and it makes the presentation look so sloppy, right?
Yeah, and for people who are watching, they're like, wait a minute, he just put it in one as a powder and he put it into the other one as like a liquid mixture. What's going on there? So
you can absolutely take Moo Gloo RM, just mix it 3 parts water, 1 part Moo Gloo, and you can make a slurry, and you can apply it in 2 different ways. So there's no, I mean, it depends on how you do it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the effect.
Right, and you wouldn't want to put the slurry in your Duxelles because it will make it.
Yeah, you'd just be adding too much water. But with this, I'm just doing it because I can brush it on and make sure it's a nice, even, thin layer.
Okay.
So I'm going to add some of this Duxelles. I don't need all of this Duxelles, and you can just save it for the next time, where you can make little Duxelles patties if you wanted to.
Okay, cool.
So just some of it on here. I'm going to spread it out. So I'm going to make sure that I'm obviously not pushing it past the prosciutto.
Yeah, and as you're spreading,
even layer. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so when people are thinking about doing a dish like this, which does take some work and prep time, how far ahead would you recommend that they make this Duxelles and the TG and the sodium caseinate to give it proper time to bond?
So I would do this about 18 to 24 hours before you move on with the recipe. So it's actually pretty well in advance. You can take it and make the recipe immediately after this because, like I said, with heat, transcontaminates will bond. But if you want to get the best bond, you're going to have to give it a little bit of time, and the best way to do that is just in the refrigerator overnight is going to make sure that it is just has the best bond so it can stick to everything.
Okay.
Great. So quickly, I'm going to take a little bit more of my slurry, and I'm just going to brush it on top here. Just on a little bit of it, because I'm going to be adding my my beef tenderloin here. So I place that on.
Yeah, and you actually just reminded me of another common question we get, which is we usually recommend people use TG with raw proteins. But in this case, we're brushing it onto things that are already cooked. Does that make a difference? And if so, like, is there, what should people be mindful of when they're going through this process?
So that it's fine as long as the protein is there. So yes, this is a cooked protein, but if you're doing raw proteins, that's generally for like sticking them together to make, sometimes like duck breast or chicken breast, you can put them together and make a roulade out of it. If they're seared, they're not going to have the best bond, but they will bond because they still have the proteins, and there's a ton of protein within here that will hydrate outward into the Duxelles. So it's totally fine to do this. All right, so I'm going to start rolling it, and I did brush a little bit over the top. I'm going to give the ends just a brush as well, just to make sure that any side of this is done. I'm just going to start rolling it. And it's okay to push down just gently. And I left a little bit at the end because I want the prosciutto to overlap onto the prosciutto here as well. Look good? Great. As you can see, it's really nice like this. And then I'm going to turn my plastic, place it here. The reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to roll it really tightly this way.
Okay.
It just gives me a little bit more on the ends.
Yeah. Do you feel like rolling it tightly is going to help with the bonding process?
Yeah, so the tighter you roll it, you kind of squish it in, and all that Duxelles is going to kind of seep into those cracks in between the muscle fibers, so you're going to get a better bond that way. So just make sure that I'm pulling it as tightly as possible so it stays nice and cylindrical.
Cool.
And you can just give it a few good rolls like this and set it in your refrigerator overnight to let it set, and then we can move on to the next step. So we're actually going to put this into the refrigerator, and we'll come back and we'll have another little setup, and we'll show you how to wrap it in the pastry, and then we can move on to the cooking.
Sounds good.
Great. All right, so we're back, and we have all of our setup here to kind of wrap our Wellington.
Okay.
All right, so we have our roulade that we made yesterday. So we have the beef tenderloin, Duxelles, prosciutto on the outside, and we wrapped it overnight, and as you can see, it holds together beautifully. Don't want to mess with it too much, but I'm going to place it right on here. This is just puff pastry, and it is just brushed with egg wash, so the egg wash will help hold on to the outside of this as well.
Okay, nice.
So I just place it right in about the center, and I'm going to pull up the sides the best I can. It's a little bit different than you'll normally see when you're wrapping things in puff pastry, but for Wellington this works beautifully. And you always want to have just a little bit extra at the end of your puff pastry rather than a little less, because you don't want it to like leak out all of its liquids. So have a little bit extra, roll it really nice, and then trim whatever you don't need.
Pro tips.
So here, these are all exposed with the flour, so I'm just going to brush a little bit of egg wash, drip there, onto this. So when I lift this up, I make sure it touches all of that exterior of the Wellington.
Ooh.
And then a bit of a roll. Great, and I think that's plenty. I don't need to keep wrapping it, because then with too many layers of puff pastry, it's going to puff, and then it'll roll the Wellington itself, and you won't get that nice design on top. It'll be more on the side.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So I can trim this off here. Just throw it on this plate here. Great. So I'll place this onto my cutting board. Just make sure it's nice, and then I'm going to brush a little bit more egg wash over the top. Make sure getting all those dry spots so it looks nice and uniform. And then we're going to score the top of this.
Okay.
And you can score it for one of two reasons. You can make a break point so that if there's a lot of steam built up within here, there can be a little spot for it to break and release any steam. Sometimes that happens towards the ends. That's fine, because those get trimmed off usually. But also for decoration, so they look really beautiful.
Yeah. And what are you baking this at once you go into the oven?
So I do about 400 degrees for 10 minutes, and then I lower it down to around 300 degrees until it reaches an internal temperature that's dead center of that tenderloin of about 115 to 120 degrees. And now people will say, oh, that seems really low. But this is a piece of meat wrapped in Duxelles and then also wrapped in puff pastry. So there's a lot of heat that's trapped in the outside of that will then continue to seep in, and as it reaches an equilibrium, it'll be higher than that 115 degrees. So there is carryover cooking that happens with this, and I don't want it to go past medium rare. Medium's okay, it's acceptable, but you'll get those with the end cuts too if you want to serve those. So we can have this, and then we just nicely score it. And I use the back of the knife. And if you wanted to, you can always create like a lattice with another piece of puff pastry, and you can lay that over the top to make a really beautiful presentation. But if you just have one, this is totally fine.
And this is just store-bought puff pastry, or did we make this from scratch?
This is store-bought puff pastry. You could absolutely make your own puff pastry. We do have like a quick puff pastry on our website that you could use as well. But yeah, this is just store-bought, which is totally fine.
Yeah, I think when you're making something like this, unless you have a ton of time, like it's great to save time when you can.
Yeah, it absolutely works. So a little bit of salt over the top. Seasons the dough, but also looks really great once it's baked. So we're going to bake this at 400 for 10 minutes and bump it down to 300. We're going to place a probe on the inside, so if you have a thermometer, place it in and leave it there, because if you keep poking it, you're going to open up a lot of spots for it to just leak out juices. So just throw in one probe, and then we'll be able to pull it out and and we'll have a beautiful Wellington.
Awesome. Another pro tip, because I would totally just keep poking it with the thermometer. All right, and we're back, and Scott's going to slice the beef Wellington on camera in just a sec. But before we do that, I wanted to really quickly talk about this week's giveaway. Now, if you're totally inspired to add this into your recipe, like in the description below, or to add it into your favorite recipe, just leave in the comments what your favorite stuffing is and what's inside it, and you can win a bag of Moo Gloo RM as well as a bag of sodium caseinate. If you go to our website, there's actually more recipes that use those 2 ingredients, so you're certainly not limited to stuffing by any means. All right, Scott, the moment of truth is here. You're going to be cutting into this. Yeah. Let's see whether the stuffing will stay put.
Great. So we'll get a few nice slices out of this.
Okay. I have such steady hands. I'm like sawing away at it. Ooh.
Really beautiful.
Yes.
Staying right where it needs to stay. We can get a nice slice out of this.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, no pull at all on the prosciutto, which you see all the time.
Get a nice shot of that.
Yeah, that
beautiful.
Looks gorgeous and tasty.
So we can put it right on here. And then we have a little bit of sauce. So on the plate already is pomme dauphinoise, which is just like a fancy French scalloped potatoes with no cheese. I know people say, oh, why don't you put cheese in it? Trust me, you make these, they're amazing. And then we have a little green peppercorn, mustard sauce, a little bit of cream, a little bit of demi-glace in there. Just put a little on the side. You don't want to cover up all that hard work you did. So Janie, if you want to try that,
okay,
you absolutely can.
Yeah, I can certainly cut into this and see whether it continues to stay put. All right. Oh,
look at that.
Absolutely like nothing came off. All right. So you can see how well it's really staying put. I'm like cutting into tiny little pieces, and it's not falling apart.
But you got to see, is it delicate? When you eat it, is it chewy or is it delicate?
Definitely delicate.
Right. So that is exactly what we wanted. We didn't want to change the dish. We just wanted to enhance it and make it better and easier to make.
It is delicious. So I'm going to probably finish the rest of that piece for lunch. I think that about wraps it up for us here. Now, if you are wondering, I think I mentioned this earlier, enter to win. You can enter to win this by leaving in the comments below your favorite stuffing, as well as if you want to learn more about transglutaminase and all of its wondrous properties, there's going to be an episode that we did all about that, as well as sodium caseinate, which is a really fun product as well and has a lot of great uses. So you can learn all about that and more. And from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Garrett.